This book right here shifted my perspective and changed the trajectory of my life. Without this book right here, I wouldn't be making these videos. I wouldn't be making this type of content. I wouldn't be in the shape that I'm in. I wouldn't be as aware or as uniquely myself as I would have been without this fucking book. This book shifted my perspective forever, and it's just so simple. It's so easy to understand. The lessons are just impactful and they hit you right in the face. And without this book right here, I would never be the man that I am today. The reason I picked up this book in the first place was because I was going through a breakup. And as breakups tend to go, you feel this raw sort of source of pain in the middle of your gut, and your heart swells up so deeply and so harshly into separate, and until it becomes so large that it splits into separate layers, into separate layers, into separate layers. And I was trying to, in some ways, distract myself, but I always had this intellectual curiosity about learning new things and learning more about myself. And I remember picking up this book as my first hobby. And honestly, I don't know, 200 books later, this book right here started my entire hobby of reading and picking up knowledge and learning more about myself and understanding more about the world and improving and refining. Without this $10 book that I picked up at a local bookstore that is now gone at our local mall, I wouldn't be in this position right now. So honestly, I just finished it for about the fifth time, and I think I have a genuine understanding of this book from page to page, to which I'm open to sharing all of the lessons, all of the insights, a practical observation, and a practical review and summary of this book, to which hopefully I'm able to impact somebody else as well who's also unaware of the things and the circumstances that they're involved in. And if that's all I do, that's my only goal, man. So I'm going to be breaking down 5 simple chapters that is pretty much the bare bones of this entire book, aka 4 Agreements. This is fun. I already love this. Don Miguel Ruiz starts off with a banger, and it's chapter 1, which is the domestication and dream of our planet. Humans are born to be dreamers, creatures that are curious and withstanding. If you really think about it, kids, when they're born, if say I drop a stick, if I drop a can, if I drop a book on the floor and tell them to pick it up, it's programmed and instinctual and natural to them to pick it up in a safe manner. They don't bend their backs, they crouch, they bend their knees and pick it up, and then use their legs to lift up the item. It's incredible. So we are just naturally born to be in a certain way. And when I think of that, I think of this quote too, which is, humans are born to be dreamers, creatures that are curious and withstanding. I think by nature and by instinct in which we are originally formed and created, that is what we are. However, we have this thing called attention, which is by far the greatest tool that we as humans have in comparison to the word. We discriminate, we focus, and we choose precisely what goes in and out of our attention. But when we're young, innocent, and most malleable is the point the adults hook our attention and place information into our minds through repetition. This is how we come to learn everything that we know. Parents taught us right from wrong and domesticated us, meaning pretty much what you would call a dog. You would want the dog to follow through on the things that you want them to follow through on. So they did that in a form of punishment and reward. If you get 20 good day passes, I take you to Hollywood Video. If you're bad, you don't get to play the PlayStation, right? So through this lens, we learned how to behave in society. Most importantly, what to believe and what not to believe. As we aged, however, our parents implemented the system into us, the beliefs, our habits, our character traits, what we believe and what we don't believe, what we think is good, what we think is bad. They implemented that into our heads by repetition. And as we age, we no longer need our parents to be the ones that are imposing these beliefs onto us, or they don't need to further domesticate us into the way that we articulate, the way we understand, the way we see the world. Now it's us that is doing it to ourselves. So no longer is our parents judging us, shaming us, guilting us. It's us, because they have captured our attention so deeply, and they gathered us when we were so young, when we were sponges, when we were so innocent, when we were so curious. They implemented that system. They beat it into us by repetition, and now that is us. So that's why many of us tend to guilt ourselves for a certain punishment or a certain mistake that we made. We shame ourselves for the way that we look and the way that we perceive ourselves in the world, right? We just judge and judge and judge based on one mistake that we've made thousands of times, but it just gets worse each time we make that mistake. The reasoning for this is this cycle of shame, guilt, and anxiety that we have, but it's also based on the agreements that we've made ourselves, the ones that have been implemented into us. So from birth, we carry this as adults, and Don Miguel Ruiz says, it's as if we live in the middle of a fog that doesn't let us see any further than our own nose. We live in a fog that is not even real. And I believe that to be true because how often am I face to face with someone who's got shame for the clothes that they wear? Fear that's inside of them the moment they remove their sweater at the gym, or being unable to be oneself freely without apologizing. You don't see this expression authentically anymore. You don't see it anymore, and it's because of the beliefs that we have, the ways that we're taught and raised as children, that you can't express yourself. You can't be this way. You shouldn't say that. Oh, this and blah, 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 blah. It's literally put a fog into our reality and leaves us restricted on what we can and can't do, whilst yearning for more courage to do what we want to do. Not only that, but trying to fulfill this expectation that they have of us that we can't fulfill, trying to be good enough for them when this image isn't real. I think the yearning for more courage for what we want to do, so often we have this belief that you shouldn't say this, you can't speak to an authority this way, but on the other side of the things that we can't do, the thing that has been instructed to us by us is what is on the other side of that is precisely everything that we want. We want to be able to get the raise, but we're too afraid to speak up to the authority figure because, well, mom and dad told us we need to respect our authority figure. Oh, we can't go out and speak in public in this way because, it's deemed a hazard. It's deemed an issue. It's deemed disrespectful to how we've lived. Disrespectful to our parents, disrespectful to the people that are around us, even though it's self-expressing. It's something that is genuinely true on our own and that we have no other way else to describe it or express it. And because we can't do it in the way that we want to, we can either try to fulfill their expectations and try to make them happy, or we just refuse to do it because if we can't have it our way, then there's no reason to do it at all. But all of this is just some dream that we live in. Just like he said it right now, it's the middle of a fog that doesn't let us see any further than our own nose. We live in a fog that is not even real. Because think about it, if our parents gave us these ideas, these beliefs, these understandings, this viewpoint, this perspective, well, they implemented that into us. So then who implemented it into them? Probably their own parents, and then probably their parents before that, and the parents before that. It's just this series of chains that is moving across throughout our days. And honestly, our greatest fear isn't death, but our greatest fear is to genuinely be alive. This chapter pretty much tries to make you understand that there is a dream being embedded into you, and it's now being presented as though this is your way of living, which is why you have this cynicism or this cycle of shame, guilt, and anxiety based on how your parents taught and raised you through repetition and how you are now domesticated. It's pretty much opening up your eyes to the way in which you now live and how the domestication process happens and how you are now being embedded into a form of a dream, which is something that is not real, something that you've been involved in for a long period of time. This pretty much sets the awareness glasses onto yourself, because most of the time this is how the domestication process works. We are hooked. Our attention is hooked as sweet, innocent little kids. Our parents teach us in a way by repetition, through domestication, by good, by bad, by right, by wrong. And they teach us this over and over again until it is actually us, to which we then grow up, we become adults, we age, and now we are now the domesticators of ourselves, or we may even be the domesticators of our offsprings, our kids. And it has happened to us by us. It is something that we just persist and continue on throughout this process. And honestly, it just kind of goes to show how much we've lost our freedom. We've genuinely lost our freedom to self-express, be authentic, or be genuine, to be like oneself, as opposed to living in this restricted sort of lifestyle that has been embedded into us by our parents. And this is a very deep and meaningful chapter because it sets the pace on what the rest of the book is going to look like and how you can eventually evade this type of lifestyle if it's no longer serving you. Chapter number 2, the first agreement: be impeccable with your word. The word is our power. Just like attention is one of the most powerful things that we have to our disposal, the word is just as important, because you either get to speak harm or you get to speak harmony. Ooh, I like that. And I like what he says here is that our minds are like a fertile ground where seeds are continually being planted. Too often, though, we obtain seeds of fear. Yeah. If you think about your mind as a fertile ground, most of the time, your mind is ready to start growing. And yeah, if your mind is ready to start growing, anything that is subdued, anything that is planted, anything that is seeded, or anything that's thrown into it, you're more likely going to be either growing it or having a lack of discernment to see whether or not it fits. Not only that, but there's this kind of toiling that you have with it, that you kind of bounce it around back and forth, to which it creates this drama inside of your head. If you think about being impeccable, impeccability in the book, he defines it as without sin. And without sin means taking responsibility and accountability for your actions, but not blaming or self-judging yourself. At the same time, sin means to go against oneself. So he's calling for us to not be sinful in our acts, not judging ourselves, not blaming ourselves, not going against ourselves in any way, not being in opposition with ourselves, but calling ourselves to be more impeccable. And if we are more impeccable, that means we're taking accountability and responsible for our actions, but also not self-judging, not self-blaming. So he calls on that the word is the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal aside from attention. If you think about it, words can cause harm or words can cause harmony. The word was used negatively with Hitler in World War II, who took advantage of a seizable opportunity to obtain power, and look at the great destructive power that occurred because of it. It's all dependent on what's inside of your heart that allows you to speak out the things that you say. Now, most people tend to use the word against themselves. If I were to use myself as an example, I constantly believed, based on what happened to me as a child and what was constantly being thrown my way in repetition, that I was stupid. And so, therefore, I created these circumstances and beliefs and took actions that were aligned with me actually being stupid. I used the word against myself. I called myself stupid. I thought that I was stupid. etc., right? And as time went on, I gave myself evidence to which I guaranteed and convinced myself, and it was true, gave myself evidence that I was stupid. Failing grades, not going to class, failing these classes, not being able to read, not being able to write certain things, not doing my homework. I had this genuine belief that I was stupid, but it was because of how I used the word against myself. And our minds are like a fertile ground where seeds are continually being planted. Too often, though, we obtain seeds from fear. Like I mentioned, I kept finding circumstances that convinced me that I was stupid, which led me to self-rejection, which would be considered the mortal sin which leads to death. And the more that I learned that, seeing my troubleshoots on a page really opened up my eyes in terms of how I was actually treating myself, giving me the unsung words I heard at the back of my mind, but I needed to read to understand. Yeah. And if you think about sin, if we think about impeccability and we think about the word, sin means to go in opposition and contradict yourself, meaning to self-blame, self-judge, go against yourself. Impeccability, he broke it down in the Latin terms, means without sin. And being without sin means taking responsibility, taking accountability for your actions, but not going against yourself. So that means not self-judging, not self-blaming. And if we think about black magic, that means using the word against yourself. So most often our best, our most strongest, our most frequent use of language is in the form of gossip. Everybody fucking gossips. And I like what he says here. He says, misery loves company. Gossip has turned into the highest form of communication among us all because it feels good to rain on someone else who's not in the room, because it's distracting us from the misery we may be feeling at the moment. And the quote Miguel says, misery loves company. That the mind is like a computer software, and the more you surround yourself or allow virus reach the fertile ground, the more you'll be using the word against yourself, or have the viruses be involved in the mind of thinking, which leads you to using the word against yourself. So in summary, being impeccable with your word is taking accountability and responsibility for the words that you use, and understanding the importance and the power of the word. That everybody has a fertile mind. Everybody has a ready to be sprouted, seeded mind that if you implement or throw anything into it, they will believe it to be true and go and find evidence that it is true. Being impeccable with your word also means to not go against yourself and to take accountability and responsibility for the things that you take on a regular basis, but also not condemning, not judging, not disrespecting yourself in any way, because to go against yourself is sin. Not only that our highest form of communication is gossip, because most of the time we are all within our own misery ourselves, that we need to believe or think that we are higher against anybody else because it feels good to knock somebody else down while they're not in the room. And also, the people that you gossip with are also in some ways miserable themselves. And he says, misery loves company. Don Miguel Ruiz calls us to spread words of love, spread words of compassion and for grace, and not to constantly sprout into others' minds or into our own of love or of hate, fear, discontent, etc. Because we can literally put ourselves into a situation of harming oneself based on this belief or this word that was used against us. So be impeccable with your word. Take accountability, take responsibility, and understand the words that you're using and what you're possibly infiltrating into other people's minds, but also most importantly, your mind. Agreement number 2, don't take anything personally. Using an earlier example, if I see you on the street and say, hey, you are so stupid, without knowing you, it's not about you, it's about me. You're using the word against yourself, because if you say something harmful towards me, I won't like you, and me not liking you is not good for you. Then, if I take something you say personally, then perhaps you actually believe you are stupid, because we only take offense to something that is larger than how we treat ourselves. You took their poison and you consumed of it. Don Miguel Ruiz says, nothing other people do is because of you, it is because of themselves. Everyone has a dream, a fantasy, some smoke or fog that they're living in. So when someone says something towards you, they're making a generalization or sharing an opinion that isn't true, that's been implemented into their head, that is based on lies, ill intent, or ignorance. And when we take what they say coming from them personally, we make the assumption that they know what is in our world and try to impose our world into their world, which is unfavorable, because you would have started a fire for no reason, and you will have consumed their poison, which now becomes your poison. And Proverbs 15 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. If you choose a calm, gentle response, that can de-escalate a heated situation and promote peace. So don't take anything personally. Usually, the people that are talking shit about you, most of the time, I think every single time, people that speak down on you is because they're worse than you. They're more miserable than you. So they tend to speak up or speak harmfully about other people, because I've never met somebody, I heard Michael Smoke say it, I've never met somebody above me who has spoken down to me. I've never seen anybody who I would trade lives with who is talking shit about me. Usually, the people that are talking shit about you is because they're more miserable than you, and you wouldn't ever dare trade lives with them because they're much more miserable than you. And I think not taking anything personally just shows your level of awareness, but also your level of maturity, because you can dispel, you can break down the matrix, you can figure out what's going on in their lives, to which you have no need to respond in a distasteful, harmful manner, because you can provide some form of sympathy. You can provide some form of sympathy for them because you understand why they're reacting the way that they're reacting. And that is such a powerful reframe, a powerful way to be more intentional, to be more observant and smart and intelligent by recognizing those patterns. That is such a powerful skill to have. And even though it is hard at first, the more that you do it, the better that you ultimately get at it. So what Don Miguel Ruiz asks of us is to don't take anything personally, because it's not about you, it's about them and what they're dealing with. Agreement number 3, don't make assumptions. This one's probably the trump of all. Yeah, I had a hard time with this. I struggled a lot with anxiety when I was like 20 years old, and I couldn't stop overthinking. So sometimes whenever I did something wrong at work, or I was spoken to about in some way at work, then I would create these stories inside of my head that everybody hated me because of this mistake that I made. And once I learned about this, that I am creating a drama inside of my head based on the things that I'm thinking about, the stories that I'm creating, and most of the time it's not true, then I'm totally fine. It's just my own thinking. But how often do we create these dramas and these generalized assumptions that eventually create problems for us? He says, all the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. Because usually we start gossiping about our assumptions, gossiping being the way we communicate to each other whilst in the dream of hell. We do it to transfer poison to one another, but it's because we're afraid to ask for clarifications. So we make assumptions, believe them, then defend those assumptions to try to prove someone else is wrong. We only see what we want, hear what we want to hear. We don't perceive things the way that they are. We have the habit of dreaming with no basis in reality. We literally dream things up in our imaginations, just for us to be surprised the moment the truth comes out and the dream we built up was not what we thought it to be. In terms of making assumptions with our relationships, we can assume a partner understands our every internal monologue at the moment that it is happening, that they know us so well to the point of mind reading, that they know precisely what to do when we want them to do it, until they don't, and a surge of emotional resentment flows itself in, and we use the word against our partner, and the issues begin to swell. How often have you made assumptions that you believe is true? How often have you created a story inside of your head that this is happening and this is the way it's going to pan out, thinking that you're protecting yourself? In reality, you're actually just making it harder on yourself. All the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. Wow. It is so damn true. All the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. 1000%. Because most of us humans suffer more in our imagination than we do in our reality. Humans suffer more in our imagination than we do in our reality. Most of the people that are miserable are the ones that have time to think about how miserable they actually are. So instead of wasting your time making assumptions, creating stories inside of your head, taking things personally, blaming other people for the assumptions that you made, how about you just ask for clarification, start asking questions? Because the fear that comes from this, I think I wrote it down here. Instead of assuming, seek courage. Courage in asking questions, courage in understanding what's actually happening and getting as much details as you possibly can. Therefore, you introduce clarity to the position and you have more power and awareness at your disposal to be able to identify the next steps. Assuming a position is lack of courage, masqueraded as preparation. You're not defining an ulterior motive. You're not some pattern recognizing oracle that is shooting 100% from the field. You're creating a drama in your head that doesn't belong because you've no evidence of its certainty. What he asks of us is courage. Have the courage to ask a question when you don't understand something. Have the courage for clarification so that way you can ask the questions, gain clarification, more clarity, to which now you have general, real awareness that you can use for your day. But if you're constantly sitting within the assumptions and the stories that you've made, you're only going to suffer. You're only going to be rooted in this drama and the sadness that you took things personally. Agreement number 4, always do your best. I don't think I have to say much about this. Always try your best with the information, the environment that you're in. Always try your best with what you have at your specific time frame. Try not to do more than what you have at your capacity, because the more that you try to do, the more you're going to burn yourself out. And if you don't give your best when you know you had more in the tank, then that is also an issue as well. You need to try your best at any given time frame that you're currently involved in. Try your best with the information that you have, because it's all our first time living. This is our first time living. And it is far too small of a life to be little. It is too far small of a life to be little, to not give your best fucking effort, the one that you know you have. Because if you constantly have this string of events where you know you could have done more, you're going to start using the word against yourself. But if you also have this string of events where you are giving your maximum effort day in and day out, yes, burnout will occur, but you will also be growing as well. So I think it's best to introduce the latter as opposed to the former. If you constantly have this goal in mind, yeah, it's nice to have a goal. It's nice to have a specific path to go down. But as I'm doing this podcast stuff too, and this YouTube stuff, the less I find myself thinking about the goal, the more I find myself just enjoying the process and trying my fucking best with the information that I have right now. And in trying your best, the better you get. In trying your best, the more you want to get better. In trying your best, the more passionate you gain from doing the thing. That's the important part. It's not what you're doing it for. Stop setting this time scale, this time opportunity, this time stamp where you want to achieve the thing and be very negatively disappointed when you don't have it by that time. Just set a goal, work your ass off towards the goal, and forget about the goal in and of itself. Just try your fucking best. Because we are in an age where it is so easy to stand out, ladies and gentlemen. It is so easy to be different. It is so easy to be a part of the 1 percentile, because everyone else has lost their fucking motor. Everyone else has lost their engine. Everyone else has lost their attention and their mind span. Everyone else is literally asleep in their own dream. And if you yourself can read this book and understand that you are getting yourself out of a dream that is not based on reality, and finally come to the beautiful awareness that you've been living in nothing but a dream. And once you get yourself out of that dream, you can then start expressing yourself, living authentically, living real to who you truly are. That is how you stand out. That is how you become more happy. That is how you have more passion. That's how you genuinely are the person that you want to be. And that's what helped me throughout this process. It's not always trying your best. It's doing the best with what you have. And sometimes you may not have a hand of cards that are well within your favor. You don't have a spawn point that's amazing. But in getting out of this mist, in getting out of this dream that is not reality, the more likely you're able to put in effort that is actually your best, because you identify in other people, you identify in the environment around you, or the people around you that are also living inside of the dream. And in this process, you become isolated and ostracized, because your way of thinking, your way of acting, your way of bestowing yourself to the world is completely different to everybody else. And that is very isolating, but it's also a fucking advantage, because you can finally understand that you don't need validation from the world. You just need validation from you, so that way you can accomplish your goals, so that way you can try your best, so that way you can do with what you need to do. All of this is getting you out of the world, the dream that you've been living in that was domesticated to you by your parents. And once you finally see the matrix, once you finally see what's going on in the apparatus and their own ways of thinking and their ways of behaving, you finally understand that you don't need to take things personally because you were once in that position yourself and now you see it. You don't need to make assumptions because you understand what's going on inside of their head. You understand why they're acting in this way. You don't need to make assumptions because you wholeheartedly understand and validate yourself. So why do you need to be thinking about somebody else who's thinking about you or talking shit about you? It's easier to be impeccable with your word because you understand what your word does to you, but what your word also does to everybody else. And you wouldn't dare spread the hate that was imposed to you first. Because now that you have this awareness, you have an obligation and a responsibility to not proceed what was proceeded to you. This book changed, man. This book changed my life, dude. And I hope it changed you. I hope you decide to pick it up and read it yourself. This is honestly like a podcast episode, but I like it that way. And maybe I'll do some cool edits so that way it feels less of a podcast episode and more like an actual YouTube long form video. But anyways, I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening to this. I appreciate you watching this all the way through. It may be a long video just because I be yapping, but honestly, if you guys enjoyed this, feel free to like, share, subscribe. If this resonated with you, if this resonated with anybody else around you, please feel free to share it to them so that way we can impact them as well. All I'm trying to do is provide some form of awareness, perspective, and impact as many people as I possibly can. Provide some form of value in any way I possibly can through the lessons and the experiences and the positives and the negatives that I've been through. I just want to help somebody else who's been in my shoes as well. And yeah, go read The Four Agreements. It's one of the most powerful books that can likely very much change your life forever. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Feel free to comment your favorite parts. Feel free to comment any, what's it called? What is that word called? Criticism. Any criticism that you guys can invite. Maybe there's something I can do a bit better. Please feel free to let me know and I will take that heavily into consideration. So I appreciate you. Go read The Four Agreements. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. And if you guys want to go listen to a podcast episode, it's up on Spotify and YouTube as the Eccentric Mind Podcast. I'll link one of those up in the description below. And I'll put one up here too. So I'll catch you guys until the next one. Have a great day.